thank you all for joining tonight. This was actually, I think, Christina's request. This topic it came because people were hoping sparkling wine season's coming up with graduations, the spring and weddings. Oh, there goes my alarm to tell me to start the clock. So what I thought we could do is talk a little bit about the two major types of sparkling wines, and then we have some wines to taste. So when we think about sparkling wine, a lot of people think of champagne, and that's made according to what we call the traditional method. That means that the second fermentation takes place in an individual bottle. So the winemakers make a wine the same way they always would, that any winemaker would make a wine. But then they put it into a bottle, they add some yeast and some sugar, and they close it up. And fermentation starts because of the yeast. The byproduct of fermentation is both alcohol and carbon dioxide. So when you cap the bottle, you're collecting the carbon dioxide and saving it, and it's dissolving into the wine. Now, in the traditional method, because you have the individual bottles, you also have the option to age those bottles, for example. And in champagne or in areas that follow that method, the bottles will stay usually held upside down so that the lees fall, which is the spent yeast, fall to the bottom. They'll stay in that position with that cap for 3 years or longer for a vintage wine, and maybe for about 1.5 years for a non-vintage wine. And during that time, new flavors are added to the wine. The yeast breaking down adds flavors like bread-like flavors or biscuit or brioche. So in addition to whatever fruit flavors are there, you'll have the addition of these flavors, plus the texture changes. The wine becomes smoother and fuller. Now, the tank method, which is the way Prosecco is made, is a very different process. All the wine is made in a closed tank. Again, first there's a base wine. Then it goes into a tank that's reinforced to contain the pressure, more yeast, more sugar, and fermentation takes place. And again, all of the effervescence is captured. Now, in this case, the goal is not to add any new flavors. The goal is to produce a fresh fruity wine. So there's no aging on the lees. The wines, as soon as the fermentation finishes within a short time, the wines are filtered and bottled, and they're released ready to drink. So on one hand, you have fairly neutral grapes with the traditional method. They'll have a little flavor, like maybe apples or lemons, flavors like that. And in the case of rosé, some red berries. And then they'll have these bready, yeasty flavors added to them. On the other hand, you'll have the Prosecco, which will taste floral and tropical. And in the case of the new Prosecco rosés, you will also get some red berry flavors. You can tell the difference, I think, when you taste them, and we'll do that tonight. Yeah, any questions about that before I go on? Okay. So we gave you some pairing ideas. They're meant to be fun. Who's got potato chips? We've got Lay's potato chips in Hilton Head. We distribute those on behalf of the club. What other potato chips do people like? Should we have a potato chip tasting tonight too?
No, you can only do plain ones.
Okay, no barbecue potato chips.
Right.
Okay, we also suggested some simple things that you could buy at the grocery store, like Parma ham, that would be great with your Prosecco, or some smoked salmon or charcuterie with your sparkling wine. So hopefully you were able to find some things to try with your sparkling wine tonight that will taste great and didn't require you to do any cooking at all. Okay. One thing I'd like to just spend a minute talking about are what we call sweetness levels in the wines, because sparkling wines sweetness level can really vary. And the reason for that is that the wine has added sugar at the very end of the traditional method process. And that added sugar amount can vary. But the most common level of sweetness for a traditional method wine is brut, which is up to about 12 grams per liter of residual sugar. That means sugar that isn't fermented out of the wine. That will taste very dry. There are drier wines than that. We actually have some tonight. We have a Brut Nature, which has essentially no added sugar, which is can be difficult to drink because the
take it out.
acidity is high and it will taste very tart. Now, the Proseccos are made differently. The Proseccos don't necessarily have any added sugar, but they don't ferment all of the sugar out of the Prosecco. They stop the fermentation by cooling down the must. And then they usually make Proseccos in what we call off dry, which means more sugar, residual sugar than a brut method, traditional
Prosecco
wine.
Stop the
Do we have a
fermentation.
question? Or is somebody,
I think someone just needs to mute maybe. If everyone could mute who isn't talking.
Lisa, I have a question.
sure.
The extra added sugar, what kind of sugar is it? Is it a fructose or sucrose or?
It could be actual sugar. It could also be in the form of rectified concentrated grape must. So it depends on the winemaker. When they create the additive at the end of the traditional method, which is called the liqueur de tirage, they often have a secret recipe. Maybe they use a little bit of reserve wine because they think that will add a little complexity. So they might take some leftover wine and add some sugar to it, or add a little bit of this concentrated grape must. So it will vary quite a bit depending on the producer. Okay. But it could be just actual ordinary everyday sugar. Okay. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So to just go back to the sweetness levels, the Prosecco that we taste tonight, if you have the La Marca Rosé, is off dry. All of the other sparkling wines that we're tasting are brut or drier than brut. So when we get to the Prosecco, we can try to see if we can taste a difference, and we can taste a little of the residual sugar in that wine, just if we notice that the wine's a little sweeter. Okay. Now, there's one thing I really want to do before we get started. You've probably already opened some of your sparkling wine, but it's very important to be careful when you open a bottle of sparkling wine. That wine is under 6 atmospheres of pressure. And when that cork comes out, it can go as fast as 25 miles an hour. So you never want to point it at anybody or anything breakable when you're opening it. Let's see if I can show this bottle right here. A good way to do it is hold it at a 45-degree angle. This will help you control the foam. When the cork comes out, it makes a little bigger opening so that you have less chance of the wine bubbling out of the bottle. So you're going to hold it at this angle, and you're going to keep your hand on the cork the entire time and try to keep pressure on the cork and go slowly so that you can really control it. It may push against your hand and make that hard to do. Now, if you have a hard time opening your sparkling wine, and that can happen with any bottle, new or old, we gave you a picture in the handout of the Le Creuset sparkling wine opener. Can everybody see this? I'll put it a little closer. What you do is after you take the foil off the capsule, these little prongs will slide down on top of the cork. Then you can I can't show you very well because my capsule, but you're just going to be able to turn it. And it gives you some extra leverage. I think it's terrific. I'll hold the box up. I did put a picture of that, but here's the box. You can see a little picture of Le Creuset. There's one last method. I'm not recommending that anybody try it at home. Has anybody seen the picture in the handout with me holding a saber in my left hand? Okay, so this is a champagne saber. Napoleon's officers started the process of opening their bottle of sparkling wine with a saber. Now, I'm not recommending you try it at home. We've actually done it. We do it outdoors. It doesn't happen probably the way you think it does. If you have a bottle of sparkling wine in front of you, run your finger around it and see if you can find a seam. You should find a seam. Anybody doing that? Can you find the seam? Then you take your saber after you've taken the foil off the capsule and you run it up the seam. Let's see if I can make this show. You run it up the seam and it catches right under this rim. You have to do it pretty firmly. You have to do it like you mean it. And it pops the cap off of the wine and it will fly across the room just like your cork will.
Does it pop the cap or does it chop the glass of the top off?
It does not chop this way, like
Doesn't break the glass
horizontally.
off, it just
As
pops
you
the
go
cap off.
up-
I'll be darned.
As you go up the side of the bottle and it catches under the rim, it pops the whole thing off because of just the combination of the pressure in the bottle and the pressure from the knife. You don't actually need a really jazzy, I'll show my saber. It has tassels and everything. You don't necessarily need any of that. I probably any sturdy, good sized kitchen knife will do the job for you. But I'm not sure I recommend that everybody try that. The bottle has to be very, very cold. That's one of the recommendations, in hopes that it will stay in one piece and that it won't shatter when you knock the top of the bottle off. Okay. But if you want to emulate Napoleon, this is your chance. Okay.
I have a little piece of trivia for once you actually get the champagne open.
What's
uh,
that?
My mom is from Spain, and one of the traditions there for good luck is if when opening the bottle, some of the champagne spills out, you know, bubbles over, whatever, you have to immediately grab it and like put it on your forehead, on everyone else's forehead, a little bit of champagne, and that brings you good luck. So if anyone is spilling now while opening, you know what to do.
All right, so this is what we expect. We expect to see you all with sticky faces very soon. Okay.
Isn't that just reunions in a different way?
Okay. So who's ready to actually taste some champagne? Okay. So next up is the Andre Clouet Grand Reserve Boozy Brut. Does everybody have a glass of this to taste? Or if you don't, hopefully you'll have it at some point soon. Okay, let's talk about this. This is real champagne from the Champagne region. I know people often call sparkling wine champagne if it's from other parts of the world, but technically this is the only champagne. As a little sidebar, there are a few wines in California that were grandfathered when the laws came in because they've been calling their wine champagne for so long. And Andre is one of them, but don't be fooled. Okay. So what's interesting about Andre Clouet is this is what we call a grower champagne. Had anybody ever heard of Andre Clouet before this list went out? Okay, so growers are people who have a relatively modest amount of land compared to the giants like Moet, for example, which if you ever visit the region and you drive around, you'll see the sign Moet in the fields everywhere. Even if they don't own the land, they've contracted with the growers because 90% of the land in Champagne is actually owned by growers, not by the big houses. So there's been a movement over the last 20 years or so for some of these growers to keep their grapes and start producing their own wines. And they have their own styles, but they also, because they don't have as big a parcel, their wine flavors may vary from year to year, just like any other vintage wine would. The big houses have so many grapes and also wine they keep in reserve, that they can have a house style, and they want you to go to the grocery store or the liquor store every year, buy that bottle of wine and have the experience you're expecting. But these growers are producing something different. Now, what's kind of neat about Andre Clouet is that all of his grapes come from Grand Cru vineyards. He's on the Montagne de Race, and he has only Pinot Noir grapes at an excellent location. So they're very high quality grapes. And he ages this wine, even though this is a non-vintage wine, which means he mixes wines from other years. He ages this for 36 months, which is the amount of time that vintage champagne is aged. So this is a very, very high quality champagne, and it's very reasonably priced. We find that it's very hard to buy a bottle of champagne for under probably about $45. This one is more like $39. And it really has a lot of great qualities. 50% of this wine is what's called reserve wine he saved and aged and matured over time. So it adds complexity. So let's taste this. Hopefully you already have, and see what we think. Okay. So can anybody taste those bready flavors I've been talking about, sort of biscuity, kind of biscuity, brioche?
Yeah, it's nice and toasty.
Toast is a great word. Anybody else? How about on the roof of your mouth after you swallow? Do you feel a little anybody feel a coating on the roof of your mouth? That comes from the lees. That's the spent yeast and the effect it has. It kind of smooths and adds body to the champagne, which that you can taste. Okay. If you're interested in grower champagnes, there are a lot of well-known growers now. If you like this, you might like Pierre Peters, for example, who makes lots of different wines. Vilmart, Vilmart. You can look for Aigle-Urier, Agripart. If you just search for grower champagne on the internet, you'll find lots of names. And these are kind of a new exploration, lots of variety in their flavors. A lot of them are very highly regarded. They receive big scores from the reviewers. Okay. What do you think about moving to Spain now? Everybody ready to try some cava? This is also a traditional method wine. It's made very similarly to champagne with the second fermentation in the bottle so that there's lees aging. And the wine that we're tasting is the flagship wine from Uvei Camps, which is a very highly respected producer in Spain. They also make a rosé, which is from 100% Pinot Noir. And that one was said to be the favorite wine of the former king of Spain. So the price is very reasonable, but the wine is terrific. So let's try this and see what we think. Now, I told you that our André Clouet was 100% Pinot Noir, which is one of the main grapes in the Champagne region. But cava is made from a unique set of grapes. It's made from Macabeo, Charolais, and Parellada. And this one has 55% Charolais, which typically gives some green and herbal flavors. So to me, I taste maybe even a little fennel. Anybody taste anything they would call herbal in this wine? It's got, like, think of herbs like thyme and think about how they taste when you add them to food. And I think you get some of those flavors here. Now, I mentioned this is aged 36 months. This is a vintage cava. So it's aged the same minimum 36 months that vintage champagne is. It's made in a region called the Penedès, and that's where 95% of the cava comes from. That's the area around Barcelona. And there are some mountains there, and they grow these grapes at elevation so that they don't get too ripe, because you don't want too many fruity flavors, and you also don't want the alcohol to be too high. The reason for that is you're going to add sugar to the second fermentation, so the alcohol level will go up then. So they usually want, in champagne or any traditional method area like cava, they want potential alcohol of around 11% in the grapes. So they grow them in these cool areas. The grapes are just barely ripe when they're picked, and they don't have a lot of flavor. You don't want really ripe fruit flavors, because you want to make way for all the flavors that come in the traditional method, all those bready, toasty flavors that are added in. Okay. Now, this wine, I suggest you drink within a year or two of release. Most sparkling wine that you purchase, you should probably drink right away. And the reason for that is that the flavors start to fade, especially in some of these non-vintage wines. So you'll have your best experience if you don't wait too long to drink them. Can I answer any questions about cava? Okay, no questions. Let's move on then to the United States. And this is a really interesting wine that we're drinking, this rosé. It was number 68 of the—
Sorry to interrupt. Just a definition of brut. Does that mean a little more dry, a little less sweet?
So if we go through the order, extra brut is the driest. It has essentially no residual sugar, sugar that wasn't fermented out, or that sugar that was added, for example, in dosage. Brut is higher than that. Brut has up to 12 grams per liter of residual sugar. It's the most common sparkling wine dry sweetness level. So Brut is generally, I think, perceived to be balanced. You don't feel like you have too much acidity. You don't feel like it's too tart. But some people enjoy the extra brut experience, or even the brut nature experience, which is no sugar. And as I said, we're having a chance to try a little of everything tonight.
Where does the cava fit in that scale? Because I sense a little bit more sweetness in the Andre Clouet.
Well, so the cava is actually brut nature, which means it has no residual sugar. So you're absolutely right. There is
Okay.
more. I think Andre Clouet is about 8 grams per liter, so it's brut. But
Okay.
extra brut is sort of 2 categories down from that. So that was very dry. The next one that we're going to try, which is the Scharfenberger, is brut. So we're back to that pretty classic category. I've got a note here, it's 10 grams per liter. So it has a tiny bit more sugar than the Andre Clouet. So let's taste this. We could smell it first. Anybody smelling any red berries, raspberries, strawberries, cherries?
Yeah, yes, I'm drinking it, Lisa, because I love the Pinot Noirs and I love, this is a nice sparkling wine. I'm not a champagne lover.
Not a champagne lover, but like this one anyway, huh?
Mhm.
That's great.
Very
So
nice.
Can I ask a question about the different blends in champagnes? Because
sure.
I know that some are exclusively Pinot Noir. And then whether it's champagne or sparkling wines, you start getting into like Chardonnay mixes in with the Pinot Noir. What are your thoughts on the best and what's your favorite? I know that Pinot Noir or Pinot Noir heavy is what a lot of, I guess what a lot of us would think of when we think of champagne, like a Veuve or a Moet, right?
So there's a little more Pinot Noir grown in Champagne. You're absolutely right. There's Pinot Noir, then Pinot Meunier, which is the other red grape you don't hear about as much, and Chardonnay are the 3 primary grapes in Champagne. And also for around the world, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are really the grapes for the traditional method. I have always liked the Pinot Noir based wines. I feel like they have a little more richness and fullness, even when they're white wines from red grapes, which is what we're drinking with the Andre Clouet. When we have a rosé, like the one that we're going to have here from Scharfenberger, this is actually 55% Chardonnay. It's 45% Pinot Noir, but they add a little bit of Pinot Noir wine at the end to get the color and the flavor profile they want, but they've still made a white wine from red grapes. So they do that by avoiding skin contact. So when you press the grapes, the color comes from the skin. So they make sure that they get the wine out of the grapes without having done that. Or if they make a rosé, they could just let a little bit of skin contact take place, but it's more common to mix a little red wine at the end. So we've had this all Pinot Noir. Now we're going to have one that is 55% Chardonnay and 45% Pinot Noir. Tell me what you think of the difference. And again, this is meant to have some red fruit flavors. And this is traditional method, 2 years of aging. It's non-vintage, but 2 years on the lees, 6 months in the bottle. So a very good long aging period to get some of those toasty flavors. It's another wine I suggest drinking within a year or two. Drink this when you buy it pretty quickly.
Yeah. Tastes great to me.
I think this is a terrific find. Roederer owns Scharfenberger, and Roederer, I think, is one of the greatest champagne houses. They have, if you go to Champagne, they have fields full of research grapes. They're growing grapes. They're trying to adapt, for example, for global warming. They're trying to improve the grape vines that they're growing. And everything they do is very high quality. They actually also make in Anderson Valley in Mendocino County, they make both a rosé and a non-vintage and vintage sparkling wine to the same standards that they make their wines in Champagne. Has everybody heard of Cristal? That's Roederer's very, very expensive premier cuvée. But we also love the Roederer rosé. But this, we thought was a great find. It's reasonably priced and it's delicious. So it's just another good wine in your sparkling category that you can buy for a reasonable amount of money. I think it has all the same qualities of a good champagne. What do the rest of you think?
It has a bit of a rosé tint to it.
It's a beautiful color. Mine's kind of
It is.
salmon colored.
Mhm.
You definitely taste the berry.
You can
I think
smell
that's
them.
why I'm enjoying it, the Pinot Noir.
I think you can really smell the berries too.
It's very, very nice.
Well, I'm glad everybody liked it. I cannot tell you how many wines John and I tasted, despite having tasted many sparkling wines over the years. Don, maybe you have, we were trying to keep a list because we were making notes about everything. We tasted a lot of wines and we had pre-selected them because we tasted so many wines. So we were really happy to come up with this group for you. Let's go to the La Marca Prosecco. And the reason I'd like to do that is so that we can compare while your rosé is still pretty cold, if you've poured it, we can compare the Prosecco rosé. So remember, there's no aging on this wine. This is made in a pressurized tank. It's filtered, it's released for immediate drinking. And I mean immediate. Just when you buy this, buy it when you're ready to drink it, take it home and open it up within a day or two. It's really meant to be very fruity, very fresh. There's nothing to be gained by holding on to this wine. Now, Prosecco is made from a different grape than the traditional method wines. It's 85% Glera at a minimum, and our rosé has 15% Pinot Noir. Now, Don very kindly just poured this for me. It's very frothy. Is everybody else's really fuzzy and frothy? And in your mouth, it's just bubbling. Nobody else has bubbly Prosecco?
Bubbly.
Really
Bubble in the
bubbly.
bottle once it's open.
Yeah.
I'm still opening mine.
Okay, take your time. So Prosecco is the most sold sparkling wine in America. 36 million bottles of La Marca Prosecco were sold last year. Now, you're going to see La Marca everywhere, and it's very inexpensive. But I want you to know that we tasted as many rosé Proseccos as we could find, and we honestly thought this was the best one. Florence Fabricant wrote an article about rosé Prosecco because this is a new category. And she highlighted this as one of the wines that she really thought was worth drinking. So Gallo actually has a special portfolio of Italian wines that they call the Lux, L-U-X portfolio. And La Marca is part of that. And I think they're making those wines to a very high standard, and they're delivering the same wine to you all the time, reliably, for a very modest price. Part of the reason is that the production method's not very expensive. You know, you don't have to put that bottle away for 3 years and wait for it to mature. You don't need storage space. You don't have
Lisa, I'm having trouble opening this bottle. It's a very different process compared to the normal cork.
How about if you get a kitchen towel and put it on it?
Wait, is it one of the little ones? Because
Yes.
sometimes the mini champagnes, you can
Yes.
take off a plastic top and then it's just a regular screw top, like
Okay.
if you were opening like a soda.
How do you
Exactly,
take
it's a twist off. So
how do you take off the plastic top?
Oh, it might try twisting it first though. See if maybe it's just a twist off with the plastic attached.
I've tried, but I'll try again.
I unscrewed mine with the plastic attached.
Yep, Peter, it's Charlie. I took a kitchen knife to it and I won.
Peter, it's a twist cap.
It's a what?
Twist it off. Twist it off.
Still getting like a kitchen towel should help.
Okay, got it. Got it. Thank you.
Laurent Perrier makes minis like that. And the plastic part is really just for show, like the fake cork. You just take it off and then it's like you're, opening up a Pellegrino or something.
You know, honestly, I really like screw caps. I think they keep your wine fresh. You don't have to worry about cork taint, and generally they're really easy to open. You don't have to have a corkscrew. You don't worry about the cork crumbling. We're all in favor of them in our household. So let's talk about this Prosecco. This is off dry. Can you tell the difference? Does it taste a little sweeter to you than the other wines we tasted?
It should be sweeter than the other ones. Is it?
I see some yeses.
Yeah, I agree.
You might not have thought about it if you hadn't tried it at the same time as the Brut wines. A lot of wines that we actually buy that are very popular wines, like say Kendall Jackson Chardonnay, they're often off dry. They have a little bit of sweetness to them. Now, I think that's a good thing with Glera because to me, Glera has a little bit of a bitter aftertaste. So I think that little bit of extra residual sugar really helps balance that. But to go back to the sales, 36 million bottles. That's more bottles sold in the US than champagne sold altogether last year, which was 34 million bottles. So Prosecco is really popular. Does everybody like Prosecco, or do you prefer the sparkling wines from the traditional method?
Well, it's a budgetary issue sometimes.
But that's a good point. I mean,
Mhm.
you can buy this little bottle for I think $6 and probably get 2 glasses of wine out of it.
Uh-huh.
Or $12 if you get a couple of them. And you
Yeah. I don't recall ever seeing these half bottles or whatever they are of Prosecco.
not too many people. La Marca makes them. You have to look.
Right.
But that's a good point too. You can buy a small bottle,
Mhm.
and it's very rare to see something smaller than a 750 ml with the other sparkling wines.
Right.
For those of you from other regions, this is the 187, this smaller bottle, the half of a half bottle, which is, as Stephanie points out, perfect for picnics and ideal for your lunchbox. So, if you're going off to work with a lunchbox.
Most of the
Peter,
rest.
you have to,
Small
oh,
bottle.
Peter, you have to ask your neighbor if they sell them at Rollers.
Okay, I will.
That's a great neighbor to have.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah, this is very nice.
I think it's great. Did anybody get any Parma ham to try with it? We did. We thought it was terrific together. Also, a little Parmesan cheese was great with it. So it makes a good picnic. Any other questions or comments about the Prosecco?
I have a general question about where Prosecco is in terms of dryness or taste compared to other Italian sparkling wines. Like, I grew up drinking Spumante wine and didn't drink Prosecco until later in life. How do those two compare?
What was the first one that you said you grew up drinking?
Spumante.
Oh, Spumante. Okay. So if you were thinking of like Asti Spumante, not the sweet, because there is a sweet.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Asti. Yes.
Yeah. Those are probably varying between dry and off dry. Also, it will depend on the producer. But I think Prosecco, with the one exception, we have another wine on this list some people might have picked up, which is actually Brut. It's almost always off dry. Also, it's so fruity that fruit flavors can make it taste sweeter. Anybody notice? What do you think? Can you taste some red berries in this, for example? And it's light. It doesn't have a lot of alcohol. Of course, none of these are high alcohol, which is great. One thing about Prosecco is that it's so popular that they've expanded the region really dramatically. And that's happened in a number of Italian wine regions. So there will be a Classico region, which is the center, the area where they originally made the wine. In the case of Prosecco, it's Valdobbiadene or Conegliano Valdobbiadene, 2 towns that are in the old center. And the wines from those two towns are considered to be a step up. We actually had a wine on this list that is from that area, from Valdobbiadene. Did anybody buy that, the Nino Franco? Did you find out the other wines first? So if you wanted to explore a very high quality Prosecco from the classic region, there is one on our list. It's again, still very reasonably priced compared to Champagne. And it's actually made in a brut manner. So it's not sweet like this, but that's very unusual for Prosecco. And I think part of the reason Prosecco is popular is that it has that little hint of sweetness to it. Did anybody buy any of the other, we had alternates in case you couldn't find the wines, starting with the Yans premium. Anybody buy the Yans Rosé from Tasmania? Okay, well, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. You have a page in the handout which tells you that they call this méthode tasmanoise, which is just another way of their describing the traditional method. And it comes from, it's made on an island, which is south of Melbourne, Tasmania, which you've probably heard of. And it's, again, reasonably priced and very delicious. I also have a note. Stephanie apparently recommends a cava. Stephanie, you want to tell us about the cava you recommend?
Sure. Yeah. The Segura Viudas Heredad Reserva. So that's the fancier looking bottle of Segura Viudas. It's glass and then has like a really beautiful metal emblem on it. And the bottom is also metal. And that's another nice one that is above like entry price point cava. That is a good representation of cava as well. So if anyone wants to explore the Spanish sparkling, I would suggest that that's one to go for too.
Did you put the name in the chat, right? So people can see it there?
Yeah, and I put the
Okay.
link, and then also some other makers that make picnic friendly mini bottles of champagne. Total Wine is a purveyor that tends to have a ton of these tiny bottles. So if anyone is wanting to do, well, I guess not necessarily picnics. If you want to do a tasting yourself without opening a bunch of big bottles, that's one way to do it too. But they're more, run of the mill, not cool stuff like what Lisa is picking out for us to try tonight.
So let's just take let's have a quick discussion of the other alternate wines that we had. Did anyone buy the Charles Heidsieck Brut Reserve? Well, let me just tell you a little bit about it. Dawn and I actually visited Charles Heidsieck when we were in Champagne. They are a house that was founded in the 19th century. And you'll notice if you look on your handout, you have a picture of a man. That's Champagne Charlie. He is credited with popularizing champagne in America. He decided he was going to expand his business. And in 1852, he came here and he became the toast of New York. And people started buying champagne. So he had a great business and he was selling champagne all over the United States. And then the Civil War started. And he had a lot of accounts payable. He'd shipped a lot of wine. It hadn't been paid for. So he decided he would come over and collect that money himself. He went to New York to the man who was supposed to be collecting all the payments from around the country. And that person said to him, I don't have to pay you money that was collected from the South, just like I don't have to pay for cotton, for example, that had to do with wartime. So he decided to go into the Deep South himself to try to collect on his accounts because there was so much money at stake. And when he reached New Orleans, he was arrested by the Confederacy and accused of being a spy for the Union. And he spent quite a bit of time in prison until the war was over. So when the war ended and he went back to France, he was broke because nobody paid him. And in fact, they had actually paid the man in New York. So this was practically the end of the Charles Heidsieck Champagne House, except that the brother of the man who had collected all the money on behalf of Charles Heidsieck was appalled by what happened. So he sent to Charles Heidsieck deeds to some land in Colorado that turned out to be for what would become Denver. And Charles Heidsieck was able to sell that land and resuscitate the Charles Heidsieck Champagne House. So it's a great story. Champagne Charlie sort of had a great boom and bust cycle, but this is a venerable champagne house that makes really outstanding wine. Don, do you want to add anything from our visit? We had such a great visit there.
Yeah, it is one of the highest value, to price ratios that I think we found in Champagne. It's on a lot of, if you're being tested on your tasting capabilities in any of these wine courses, Charles Heidsieck is often a testing wine because it's just so classic. And it's just, if you haven't had it and you like, say, the Andre Clouet, the next one to look for is a Charles Heidsieck, because it's a winner in our opinion. And they were really good to Lisa. And because I was there with Lisa, they were good to me as well. And so it's a good one.
Well, actually, before I say anything else about Charles Heidsieck, that's a good point. If you decide to visit a wine region, you can write ahead of time. Charles Heidsieck doesn't give many tours, but I wrote them a letter and I explained our interest and that we had a wine group here and that we tasted wine regularly with our group. And so they decided to invite us. We didn't realize until we arrived that they hardly invited anyone for the tours, and they could not have been kinder to us. And we learned a lot. The woman who ran the tours was exceptionally knowledgeable. And the caves are so fascinating. If you've ever been to Champagne, you go down in these chalk caves that were created when they were mining the chalk for limestone. And then they became the perfect places to age the champagne. And you walk way down, there are no elevators. You have to go down really steep stairs, way underground. In the case of Charles Heidsieck, there are actually some openings, and sometimes there are. You can see where that's how they took the blocks of the limestone out. They sort of they would use a block and tackle and pull them up through the hole in the ground. So that was great. But what's really interesting about Charles Heidsieck, and it has this in common with Andre Clouet. Remember, I talked about reserve wines, older wines that are used to add complexity and extra flavor. Charles Heidsieck in this is just the basic non-vintage wine. They use 50% reserve wines, and they have wines that are very old. Unlike many of the other winemakers that use reserve wines that are only a year or two old, some of their wines are 40 and 50 years old. The other thing about reserve wines is many of the winemakers use 10 to 15% reserve wine. They save a little bit back so they can create the blend they would like to in future years. But this is a deliberate strategy to create something really complex and very special. And they also age this wine for at least 6 years before they release it. So it's hard to say enough about how special this wine is. And it is the most expensive one on our list. It was about $45. But as wines and champagne go, it's better to compare it to a vintage champagne, which probably costs more like $70 and up. So it's not just that we went there, it's that we think it's very special and the price is great for what it is.
So if you're looking for a really good champagne without having to pay hundreds of dollars for some of the fancy names, look at the Charles Heidsieck. My view, though, following Charlie's inspiration about reunion drinking, is that if you want a champagne for reunions, the Andre Clouet, a wine from Boozy, seems to be, have the right origins for a place like reunions.
So noted, Don. Thanks for that. I'm helping plan out our 40th, and so noted. It's on the list.
Great. I see Christina has a question about how to store open sparkling wine. Don't put a stopper in it. It could explode in your refrigerator or in your car if you're taking it home from an event. Oh, it's not an easy thing. Don, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. You can buy something that says it's a sparkling wine cap, but I don't recommend it, to be honest, because even though your wine might seem a little flatter than when you opened it, there's still a lot of pressure that can build up if you put a cap in it, and that cap isn't secure. Any thoughts, Don?
So Lisa did a tasting at a local club with us, Champagne, and one of the members really liked it, and there was some more in the bottle, so they asked if they could take it home. So the club kindly took a wine cork and pounded it into the champagne and gave it to them. And on the way home, and here in Hilton Head, we are the home of speed bumps, as all of our local club members know. After a few speed bumps, that cork popped out, and their inside roof of their car was, showered with the champagne. So it's a tricky thing, and if you put some sort of stopper on it, even if it doesn't explode, the carbon dioxide, which makes it fizzy, which is part of the fun, will end up dissolving in the air inside the bottle, even if it doesn't dissolve in the air outside the bottle. So I'm not an engineer, but somebody's going to have to engineer something better than what we have now.
So I think then sounds like the Drakemans are suggesting just finish the bottle.
You're just going to have to drink it. All right.
Okay, all right. For
Drink
for the safety of all involved, just
Right.
finish the bottle.
We have one more wine on the list I'd like to tell you about. I don't know if anybody bought the Nicolas Fouillat Reserve. That's also a rosé. But I wanted to tell you about this wine for a couple of reasons. It's actually made by a co-op. They sound like they named it for a person, but remember I told you that 90% of the land in Champagne is owned by growers. So a number of them got together and they decided to make this wine. It's actually the third biggest champagne selling brand, Nicolas Fouillat. It's another one that's very reasonably priced, very high quality. It's the same traditional method, the méthode champenoise, and it's 45% Pinot Noir, 45% Pinot Meunier, and 10% Chardonnay. If you happen to buy that bottle, you could see a little code on it. It says CM, which is for the cooperative producers, just like you would see NM for the big houses, because NM is négociant, because they buy grapes. And if you see an RM, that's because the person who grew the grapes made the wine. So there's fun little hints in there. But I just thought it would be fun to know that there's a co-op. You may not know that more than 50% of the wine in France is made by co-ops. So a co-op is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a very important co-op in Chablis, for example, that makes a lot of the wine there. And there are a lot of co-ops in Burgundy, one of the finest wine regions. Now, again, very reasonably priced because it comes kind of from the growers to the co-op to you. Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments? Well, you're a quiet group tonight. I think you need to drink more of your champagne.
Just a great selection of champagnes for us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great for the end of the day. I just want to tell you, I am so chilling.
We didn't have to open all of your bottles at once for the tasting, and you have a list now if you're interested in sparkling wines, and you have a handout which gives you a little background on each of them, so you can explore those in the future. I want to make sure that I thank all of the clubs that came together for this. We have the Princeton Club of New England. We have the Princeton Club of New York City. We also have, yeah, you should wave if you're from these clubs. We have Northern California. We have the APGA. We have some graduate alums on the call, I think, and we have St. Louis as well. St. Louis are our original requests. So this is just so much fun that we can all get together and do this. And I think this is one of the great benefits of Zoom, where we're not losing anything. We're doing something we couldn't do otherwise. Not to mention that you're all washing your own glasses. We're not trying to pour 4 glasses for every single person.
We introducing me to the Andre Glouet. I think it's phenomenal, and I've never had it before, and this really stood out. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. I think the growers are a little harder. It's harder to know their names. But they have some really special wines to offer. I'm glad you liked it. He does something actually called a Solera. Remember I said they have reserve wines and they blend in little bits. He takes some of his older wines and he blends them together. So they call that a Solera. You keep adding new wine every year and it goes back maybe 20 years or something, and you just keep adding and you take a little bit out every year. So there's always some of the older wine in. That's done in the sherry region, but it's very rare in other parts of the world. Okay.
Hey, Lisa, I just want to thank you for, again, your amazing knowledge and enthusiasm and for putting a little sparkle in our evening. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Rob. And thanks for signing everybody up. So I think this is our last tasting for a while. Summer's coming, but if you have ideas, we would love to do some more of these. It's been a lot of fun. And Don and I will do our homework and do some tasting and find some wines for some new topics. And thanks also, before we sign off, we don't see Cindy and baby Eleanor right now, but Cindy does such a great job. She makes these handouts for us. She designed that beautiful invitation you all received. There she is.
Yep.
Bravo,
Thank you,
bravo.
There you go. And we can thank Christina. She made this Tiger Sommelier that we've been using for our tastings too, while Cindy was on maternity leave. And Cindy's still really on maternity leave, but she made us a handout anyway. And there's her husband, Richard.
Three cheers.
And there's our, yes,
There
this
she
is our
is.
picture of baby
Thank
Eleanor. Yeah, okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we've had a great tasting. Really appreciate all of you joining, and we'll look forward to doing this again sometime.